Caleb Whitmore buried his wedding ring on a cold November morning, not because he wanted to forget, but because remembering hurt too much to carry. The wind off Lake Harlow was sharp enough to sting his face, yet he stood there long after the small box disappeared beneath the soil, his hands numb, his chest hollow. He whispered an apology to the woman he loved and lost, and with that whisper he made a promise, to her memory, to himself, that he would never marry again. Love, he decided, was too fragile, too cruel, too unforgiving. It took everything and left nothing behind but echoes. 3 years passed, and Caleb built walls around his life the way his father had built fences around their ranch. Solid, high, impenetrable. The townsfolk of Briar Creek respected him, some feared him, and most pitied him. He was a good man, honest, hardworking, generous when no one was looking, but he was closed like a locked church on a weekday. He ran Whitmore stables with quiet discipline, speaking little, working long, keeping his grief folded into routine. He didn't attend weddings. He didn't dance. He didn't look at women twice. When kind-hearted Mrs. Dalton tried to introduce him to her niece, he politely declined and went back to mending fences in the rain. When the sheriff joked that he'd die an old bachelor, Caleb just shrugged. It wasn't a joke to him. It was a plan. Then, on a heavy June night, everything changed. The storm came fast, cracking the sky open with lightning that made the hills glow white. Caleb was in the barn calming a restless mare when he heard frantic knocking on the stable doors. Sharp, desperate, uneven. He opened them expecting a traveler, a lost hiker, maybe a drunk fool running from the rain. Instead, he found a bride. Her veil was torn, her dress was soaked and streaked with mud, her mascara had run down her cheeks like ink, and her breath came in trembling gasps. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much in too little time and whispered, "Please don't send me back." Caleb froze, because something in her voice cracked open the walls he had spent 3 years building. Her name was Lily Hart, though she spoke it like she wasn't sure she deserved it anymore. Caleb wrapped her in an old wool blanket and led her inside the tack room, lighting a lantern that painted warm gold across her pale face. She looked exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix, like someone who had run not just from a place, but from a future she couldn't bear. "I ran from my wedding," she admitted quietly, staring at her shaking hands. "I know how it sounds." Caleb said nothing. He had learned that silence often gave people courage to speak truth. "My fiancé, he wasn't who I thought he was. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. Controlling, angry, the kind of man who smiles in public and squeezes your arm hard enough to bruise when no one's watching." Her voice trembled. "Tonight, he told me I belonged to him, like I was something he'd bought." Lightning flashed outside. Caleb's jaw tightened. "So I ran," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go. He should have sent her to town, to the sheriff, to a motel. That would have been sensible, safe, distant. Instead, he heard himself say, 'You can stay here tonight.'" She looked up, surprised by kindness she clearly hadn't expected. "Thank you," she breathed, and those 2 words landed heavier than anything Caleb had heard in years. That night, he gave her the small room above the barn. He lay awake below, staring at the rafters, listening to the storm and the faint creak of her footsteps overhead. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he was just helping a stranger. He told himself promises made to the dead still mattered. But when morning came, and Lily stepped outside with sunlight tangled in her hair, feeding carrots to the horses with soft laughter, something shifted inside him, something warm and terrifying. Because for the first time in years, Caleb Whitmore felt his heart beat not from pain, but from possibility. Lily stayed 1 day, then 2, then a week. She worked hard, insisting on helping with chores, scrubbing buckets, brushing horses, mending old blankets with clumsy stitches that made Caleb hide a smile. She never complained, never asked for more than a safe place to sleep and a chance to breathe. Yet sadness clung to her like mist. Some nights, Caleb caught her staring toward the road, fear flickering in her eyes. Other nights, he heard her crying softly into her pillow. He pretended not to notice, but he always made sure the barn doors were locked. One evening, while fixing a broken fence, Caleb asked quietly, "You gonna go back?" She shook her head. "I'd rather face the world alone." Something fierce rose in his chest. "You're not alone here." She looked at him then, truly looked, like she was seeing the man behind the silence. And he saw her too, not as a runaway bride, not as a stranger, but as someone brave enough to leave everything behind rather than lose herself. Days turned into laughter. Shared coffee on the porch, quiet conversations under starlight. Lily's smile grew stronger, steadier, and Caleb's walls began to crack. But love is never simple, not for broken hearts. Because one afternoon, a black car rolled into Briar Creek, dust rising behind it like a warning. Inside sat a man with cold eyes and a diamond ring in his pocket. A man who didn't believe in losing what he considered his. And when Caleb saw Lily's face drain of color at the sight of that car, he knew something dangerous had found its way to his door. For the first time since he buried his ring, Caleb Whitmore felt fear, not of loving again, but of losing someone he hadn't meant to love at all. And the promise he made to never marry again suddenly felt like a chain around his heart. The black car idled like a threat outside Whitmore stables, its polished surface reflecting the quiet fields in a way that felt wrong, like a city shadow had crept into a place built on sun and dust. Caleb stood near the barn doors, one hand resting against the rough wood, watching the engine hum without a driver stepping out. He knew instinctively that whoever sat inside wasn't lost. Lily stood behind him, frozen, her fingers curled into his shirt sleeve like a child clinging to safety, and Caleb felt her fear in the way she trembled. Not dramatic, not loud, just silent, bone-deep terror. The car door opened slowly. A tall man stepped out, sharp suit, polished shoes sinking awkwardly into the gravel. His smile was smooth, practiced, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Lily," he said softly, as if greeting her after a pleasant afternoon. "You gave everyone quite a scare." She didn't answer. Caleb felt something inside him turn to steel. "Who are you?" Caleb asked. The man extended a hand. "Victor Hale, Lily's fiancé." The word fiancé hung in the air like a lie told too many times. Caleb didn't take the hand. Victor's smile thinned. "I came to bring my bride home." Lily's grip tightened. "I'm not going back." Victor laughed lightly. "You're emotional. Weddings do that. You just panicked." Caleb stepped between them. "She said no." The quiet certainty in his voice changed something. Victor's eyes sharpened, studying Caleb like an obstacle rather than a person. "Mr. Whitmore, is it?" Victor said. "I'd hate for you to get involved in a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Caleb replied. "She stays." Silence stretched. Then Victor leaned closer, voice low and venomous. "You don't know what you're doing." Caleb met his gaze. "I know exactly." And for the first time, Victor Hale looked like a man who wasn't used to hearing the word no. Victor didn't leave that day. He lingered in Briar Creek, staying at the town's only motel, smiling politely in diners, shaking hands, spreading charm like bait. He told everyone Lily was his runaway bride who'd been overwhelmed by nerves. He made it sound harmless, romantic even. But Lily knew better. And so did Caleb. One night she sat on the porch steps with him, her knees pulled to her chest, watching fireflies blink in the dark. "He won't stop," she whispered. "Victor never stops." Caleb didn't speak. "He doesn't hit," she continued, voice hollow. "Not where people can see. He controls, he isolates. He smiles while he takes everything you are." Her eyes filled. "I was disappearing. I didn't even realize until I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore." Caleb's chest tightened. He remembered standing at a grave 3 years ago, promising never to risk loving again. Remembered how helpless grief felt, how final loss was. But watching Lily, he realized something worse than losing someone was watching them lose themselves. He turned to her. "You won't go back." She looked at him like she didn't believe she deserved that promise. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Because the truth was terrifying. Because no one helped me when I needed it," he said finally. "And I won't let that happen to you." Lily's tears fell silently. She rested her head on his shoulder, and Caleb sat still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid of how right it felt. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that he was breaking his promise. Another voice whispered that maybe promises made in grief weren't meant to last forever. Victor came to the ranch 3 days later with the sheriff, not to cause trouble, to look reasonable. "She's confused," Victor told the sheriff gently. "I just want to talk." The sheriff looked uneasy. Lily stood beside Caleb, pale but steady. "I'm not going back," she said clearly. Victor's smile cracked for the first time. "You think this man cares about you? He doesn't even believe in love. Ask him why his wife died alone in a hospital while he was away on business." The word struck like a whip. Caleb went still. Lily turned to him stunned. "Caleb." Victor stepped closer, voice cruelly soft. "He promised never to marry again because he blames himself. He destroys the women who love him." Caleb's hands shook. Because guilt is a wound that never fully heals. His wife, Anna, had died in a sudden illness while he was away. He had rushed back too late. He had buried her with apologies and promises he thought were penance. Victor smiled. "You see, he's broken. You don't belong here." Lily looked at Caleb, searching his eyes not for truth, but for courage. Caleb swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to protect himself, to let her go before loving her could hurt again. But Lily's fingers found his hand, and he understood something. Fear wasn't love, avoidance wasn't loyalty, and hiding from pain didn't honor the past. He stepped forward. Anna died, he said quietly, and I'll regret that forever. But loving her wasn't a mistake. He looked at Lily. Helping you isn't either. Victor's face hardened. You're making an enemy. Caleb's voice didn't waver. Then leave. The sheriff shifted awkwardly, sensing something deeper than a lover's quarrel. Victor finally turned, walking back to his car, fury tight in his shoulders. But before leaving, he looked at Lily and said softly, "You can run, but you can't hide forever." The car disappeared down the road. Night fell heavy over the ranch. Lily sat beside Caleb in silence until she whispered, "You don't have to do this for me." He stared at the stars. "I'm not doing it for you." She looked confused. He turned to her. "I'm doing it because I'm tired of being afraid to live." And in that quiet moment, under a sky full of witnesses, Caleb Whitmore realized something that frightened him more than Victor Hale ever could. He was falling in love again. The storm came back the night everything changed. It rolled over Briar Creek like a memory refusing to stay buried, thunder cracking through the hills while wind bent the fields into restless waves. Caleb Whitmore stood on the porch, staring into the dark road, because sometimes you know trouble is coming long before you see it. Lily had been quiet all evening, not the gentle quiet she wore while feeding horses or stitching blankets. This was the kind that felt like goodbye. When he found her in the barn, she was brushing the old chestnut mare with slow, careful strokes, like she was memorizing the rhythm of something she might never do again. "You're leaving," Caleb said softly. She froze. Tears filled her eyes before she could hide them. "He won't stop, Caleb. Victor will hurt you. He'll ruin this place. He'll lie. He'll twist everything. I won't let you lose your life because of me." Caleb stepped closer. "You're not a burden." "I am," she whispered. "I bring trouble everywhere I go." He reached for her hands. They were cold. Shaking. "You didn't bring trouble," he said. "You ran from it." She looked up, eyes breaking. "And now it's here." Lightning flashed, and in that bright second he saw her the way he had the first night, scared, brave, exhausted, determined to survive even if she had to do it alone, and something inside him refused. "I won't let him take you," Caleb said. "You can't stop him," she whispered. He thought of Anna, of regret, of promises buried under cold earth. Then he said something he hadn't said in years. "I don't need to stop him," Caleb said quietly. "You do." She stared at him, confused. "You're stronger than you think, Lily Hart. You ran once. You can stand now." Her breath trembled. "What if I'm not enough?" Caleb's voice was steady. "Then I'll stand with you." Outside, tires crunched on gravel. The black car had come back. Victor didn't come alone this time. Two men stepped out behind him, silent and heavy like shadows hired to intimidate. The storm wind whipped his coat as he walked toward the porch, smiling that calm, poisonous smile.
"Enough games," Victor said. "Come home, Lily."
She stepped forward before Caleb could speak.
"No."
One word. Clear, strong. Victor's eyes darkened. "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm saving myself," she replied. The hired men shifted, uneasy. Victor laughed softly. "You think this man loves you? He doesn't even believe in marriage." Caleb felt Lily glance back at him. He stepped beside her. "He's right," Caleb said. "I promised I'd never marry again." Victor smirked. Then Caleb continued, voice steady. "Because I thought love only ended in loss. I thought protecting myself meant never risking my heart." He looked at Lily. "I was wrong." Silence fell. Victor's smile faded. "You think you can play hero?" Caleb shook his head. "No, I'm just done being a coward." Victor's temper snapped. "She's mine. We're engaged." Lily's voice cut through the storm. "I never belonged to you." The words struck harder than thunder. Victor grabbed her arm. Caleb moved before thinking, pulling her free, standing between them like a wall. The hired men stepped forward, but the sheriff's truck light suddenly blazed down the road. He'd been watching, waiting, and with him came half of Briar Creek, neighbors who believed quiet kindness deserved protection. Victor saw the truth then. Control didn't work when people stood together. "You'll regret this," he hissed. But Lily didn't flinch. "Leave," she said. And this time he did. Not defeated forever, but defeated enough. The storm eased. The car vanished, and Lily stood trembling under the porch light, free in a way she'd never been before. She looked at Caleb with tears shining. "It's over." He nodded. "It's over." But something inside him was only beginning. Autumn came softly to Briar Creek. Leaves turned gold. The air grew cool. Horses breathed mist in the mornings. Life settled into something gentle again. Lily stayed, not as a guest, not as someone hiding, but as someone building a future. She opened a small writing program for children who couldn't afford lessons. She laughed more, slept better, sang while sweeping the barn, and sometimes, when she thought Caleb wasn't looking, she watched him with quiet love shining in her eyes. He saw it, he felt it, and he was terrified. Because loving again meant risking everything he had already lost once. One evening they stood by Lake Harlow where Caleb had buried his ring. The sky glowed pink and gold, water calm as glass. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Lily said suddenly. His heart dropped. "Why?" "Because I'm not running anymore," she said. "I need to build something that's mine. Somewhere, somehow." He swallowed. "You don't have to go alone." She smiled sadly. "You promised you'd never marry again. And I won't be someone's almost." Silence filled the space between them. Caleb looked at the place where he had buried his past. He thought of Anna, of grief, of promises made from pain. And he realized something simple and terrifying. Love doesn't replace what you lost. It honors it. He knelt in the dirt and dug until his fingers closed around the small metal band he had buried 3 years before. Lily gasped softly. Caleb stood, holding the ring, voice shaking. "I promised never to marry again because I was afraid, not because love was wrong." He stepped closer. "Anna taught me how to love. Losing her taught me how precious it is. And you taught me how to live again." Tears streamed down Lily's face. "I don't know what the future holds," Caleb said. "I don't know if I'll be enough. But I know I don't want a life without you in it." He took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. "Lily Hart, will you marry me?" The world went quiet. Wind whispered through the grass, the lake shimmered, and Lily, wary runaway bride who had crossed storms and fear and heartbreak to stand here, smiled with all the hope she had fought to keep alive. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Caleb." He slipped the ring onto her finger, not as a replacement for the past, but as a promise for the future. And when he held her close, Caleb Whitmore understood something he had never known before. Love doesn't betray memories. It gives them meaning. The man who swore he would never marry again stood under a quiet autumn sky with a woman who had once run from love. And together, they chose it anyway, because sometimes the bravest thing a broken heart can do is beat again.